All right, who would like to read? Come on, somebody's got to volunteer.
Rabbi, I
Oh,
don't
Ed.
mind.
Okay,
I open my
Bavakasha,
honor.
Cynthia. Thank you.
Sure. So we begin. Tell the Israelite people to bring me gifts. You shall accept gifts for me from every person whose heart so moves him. What is the difference between a Terumah and a Nedava, an offering and a donation? What's charity?
So this is a very important discussion throughout Jewish philosophical texts. So first of all, you should know charity comes from a Greek word, kirutus, which means not compassion, but what's the correct term? It means when you feel sorry for someone. That's what kirutus means. Charity, kirutus. That means you feel sorry for a person. But how do you say when you give someone money who's hungry? What's that term in Hebrew? Anyone shoot it out? Tzedakah.
Okay.
And tzedakah means justice. Tzedek means justice. So there's a big difference. In Judaism, let's go back. In other people's philosophy, charity means you feel sorry for the person. But in Judaism, when you give charity, when you give something to a person who's hungry, who's starving, who doesn't have medicine, then the term is actually justice. You're doing the right thing. And that's a major difference in the philosophy of it. So let's get back to Terumah. Does anyone know what the root word of Terumah is? Rom.
To elevate.
To elevate. So a Terumah is when you take something from a lower level and you raise it to a higher level. So how would you do that? Let's say, for example, where does gold come from? Where does a person find gold?
The earth.
In the earth, exactly. So the first level of lifting is when you dig down, you find the ore, and then you lift it up out of the earth. And then the second level is you have to smelt it. You have to melt it. You melt away all of the impurities in the dirt, and then you have the metal itself. Then what do? Well, in this particular Parashah, now first level is you lift it out of the earth. The second level is you lift it out of its impurities. And the second level is now that you have gold, what do you do with it? And the answer is that you give it to a holy purpose. And that is the emphasis of these different words. Now we're studying about how to lift things spiritually from a physical level to a physical level. One of the most important things that Judaism teaches that to the untrained eye, for example, to the untrained eye, rape, let's say you didn't know context, rape and an act of love between loving couple. Well, if you were on the outside looking in, you say, oh, the same exact act. And the answer is absolutely wrong. They're complete opposites. One is an act of violence, and the other act is an act of love and commitment and spirituality. In Torah life, intimacy with your spouse is an act of spiritual giving, and it's elevating a physical life. So in Judaism, the same exact act can be holy or sinful, but physically, it would appear to be the same. And what we're doing here in Terumah is we're taking items, for example, gold, silver, stones that have to be mined out of the earth. And we're constantly reminded that in Judaism, we have to take whatever we have and elevate it in steps to make sure that we are in a process of daily life of spiritually elevating everything that we own, everything that we have. Let's continue.
And these are the gifts that you shall accept from them: gold, silver, and copper. What do these three have in common?
Anyone? They're metals. Like we just said, one, they come from the ground. Second of all, you smelt them and they become ignits, and then you know, in ancient times, you can make, you know, art out of them, you can make jewelry out of them, you can make vessels out of them. And the whole idea is, oh, Rabbi, okay, I can understand gold and silver, but how could you make copper holy? Anyone? Anyone have any ideas how to make copper holy? How did they do it in ancient times?
Polish it, I don't know.
All right, so you know what, Ahuva, let's share that. One of the items that we're going to study was the copper laver. And I'm going to show you a picture of it actually. The laver was this huge water cistern or wash basin that before any ritual in the sanctuary, in the tabernacle, the Kohanim, the priests, had to wash their hands. And guess what it was made out of? It was made out of copper. So the whole idea is that this laver is going to be the last of the holy furnitures discussed in the Torah. The rabbi said, oh, you know why it's the last? Because it's the least holy. And you know why it's the least holy? Is because it was made out of anyone? The copper mirrors of the women. So if you go to Israel, and if you go to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and you go down into the where they have the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll see items that they found in the caves when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And some of those things that you'll see is it's called a burnished mirror. And what it is it was a piece of copper on a stick in a frame. It looks like a vanity, literally a vanity mirror. My mother and my wife used to have, my wife actually has one now. It's on a handle with a oval frame, and the mirror is in it. Now, what did they do 2,000 years ago? More, 3,000 years ago. They would make a flat copper cover it to the wood, and then they would highly gloss it. They would polish it. And you'd literally be able to see your reflection in a brandished copper mirror. So the whole idea is that there were those rabbis who said, you know why it goes last is because they used it for vanity purposes. And that's why it's last. And then the other rabbi said, absolutely not. And this is the majority of the great mystics explain. The reason why it's noted last is because acharon chaviv, the last in a list is the most important. And why was this most important? Because the women, one, why did they make vanity mirrors? Because our fathers were in slavery. Our fathers, our brothers, our husbands, whatever, they were depressed and they didn't want to have sex with their wives. They said, why should I have sex with my wife? Why should I have more babies? To make more slaves for Pharaoh? So the wives used to use these mirrors to make themselves attractive, to flirt with their husbands. By the way, that's why our tradition is that the women were on a higher level, especially in Egypt. Now, regardless, the whole idea is if you were on the outside looking in, you'd say, oh yeah, that's why they call it a vanity mirror, because all these women in Egypt were vain. No, they were doing this for all the right reasons. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is, when they saw that no one was bringing copper, the women gave up their vanity mirrors because they wanted to elevate it to a higher level. So there you see that we can take anything, a mirror that would normally be used for vanity, we can use it for, you know, looking in a mirror, but the purpose of making ourselves attractive is all the right reasons. And then they elevated even those mirrors to the holiest level so that the Kohanim could wash and cleanse themselves before rituals. So life is the process of taking everything we have, cups, saucers, dishes, cars. How could you make a car into a holy item? How could you elevate your car? That's not a rhetorical question. You answer me. You have a car, right? Raise your hand. Do you have a car? Okay, everyone has a car. Sylvia, did you raise your hand?
By using it for a holy purpose?
And give me an example of a holy purpose.
Like for people to go around and get tefillin put on
All right, so this happened last year, and I got in trouble for it, but I'll tell you what I did. I was coming home, driving my car, and COVID was still a thing, and people were still wearing masks. And there was this woman schlepping a baby. Um, and I pulled over, and it was raining. And I said, "Can I give you a ride?" And she goes, "Oh my gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Do you mind if I get in without a mask?" So look, I was triple vaccinated or whatever. So yeah, sure. And she goes, "Oh, you don't have a car seat." So I go, "No, I don't have a car seat." But she got in anyway because it was pouring rain, and I brought her home. Okay. Needless to say, there were members of my family that weren't thrilled. Not because I gave her a ride, because she wasn't wearing a mask in a confined area. And yeah, I should have opened up the windows. It was raining. I'm not going to open up the windows. But the whole point is, you use your car for holy purposes. You know what? Shalach Manas next week. You use your car to deliver packages of food to the needy, to the kosher food bank. Yeah, there's so many different ways to use your car for holy purposes. So everything you have, you should be able to think of ways to elevate it. That should be our motivation. So let's continue.
Rabbi,
Yes, question from Sarita.
yes, Rabbi, did the women in Egypt serve as slaves in the Pharaoh's palace, or the women were not slaves in the field like the men? So did they serve as slaves in other occupations?
So, to my understanding, to best of my knowledge, we were not slaves in Pharaoh's court or in Pharaoh's palaces or mansions. We were builders. We built Pitom and Ramses. That's all the Torah says. We were enslaved, but farech, and farech means useless, busy work that was demeaning. So, for example, what type of work was it? For example, it says things like in the army. My brother-in-law used to tell me that in the United States Army in boot camp, when you did something wrong, the punishment was they'd have you dig a ditch. So he and two other guys, they did something wrong, and their punishment was they had to dig a ditch. And every 20, 30 minutes, the company, their sergeant would come out and yell at them. And then at the end of like 3 hours of digging the ditch, they get out of the ditch and the sergeant comes over and goes, "Good job. Now fill it in." So while they were digging it, they thought they were digging a ditch, for training purposes. Maybe they're digging a ditch for irrigation. No, it was a punishment. Just dig the ditch and now fill it in. And that's what the Egyptians did to us. And that's why it says they enslaved us befarech, with hard, useless labor. So, for example, people say, "Well, why don't we know Pitom and Ramses? Where are these cities? They don't exist anymore." Well, 2,000 years ago, the Talmud explained that's right. They didn't exist back then very long either, because they deliberately had us build these cities in marshland, where the weight of the bricks were so heavy that it just every couple of days it would just sink a little bit lower, and we just have to keep on building and building and building so that the Egyptians could enjoy their time in the buildings. But every day, they built 2 stories, and the next day would sink, and then they have to build a second story again because the second story had become the first story. So the idea is that to the best of my knowledge, women did not, even men didn't work in the pharaohs. That even not only did the women not, even the men did not work in the palaces.
Rabbi, because all
Yes.
of these classes that we are having, and when you were talking about that when the time that we left and the people that stayed, could it be that the ones that they stayed were sort of happy with the status quo?
So there's something called the Stockholm Syndrome, which is now documented. It was the first true experience of the Stockholm that we know, that we as Americans know, was Patty Hearst. In the early 1970s, she was the heir to the Hearst fortune. She was a billionairess, and she was about 22 years old, I think, and she was kidnapped, and she disappeared. There was, there was no, they didn't want money to return her, but 6 months later, she had been literally raped and tortured for 6 months, and they brainwashed her, and she became a member of their terrorist group. And if you remember, about a year after she had been kidnapped and disappeared, she robbed a bank with them. Do you remember this, Patty Hearst? And
Yes.
they got caught, and her defense was the Stockholm syndrome. It is a documented phenomena where people, after even a short while, psychologically something flips, and they start associating with their oppressor rather than acknowledging their victimization. So what happened in Stockholm, why is it called the Stockholm syndrome, is that 3 or 4 bank robbers went into a bank and started robbing the bank, and somebody set off the alarm, and they actually held everyone hostage for like 5 days. And afterwards, you know, under threat of being killed, every single one of the hostages turned, and at the trial defended the bank robbers who threatened to kill them. It was called the Stockholm syndrome, based on this bank robbery in Stockholm. So the idea is that there are those who explain why it says, and the children of Israel left Egypt chamushim. And chamushim can either mean armed with weapons. They stole the weapons. We took the weapons of our enemies. And the second option is chamesh, means 5. Chamushim means we left Egypt 1/5. That means 80% of us remained in Egypt. And there are those rabbis who explain, yeah, they stayed because of Stockholm syndrome, that emotionally and psychologically they had started to commiserate or change their affinities to our enemies. The second option is like maybe what you said is also very accurate. That in the Torah it says that in the 7th year every slave goes free. Yes, there was slavery in ancient Israel, but you should know it's not like the type of slavery that was here in America. So, for example, you were not allowed to hit your slave. If you hit your slave and you knocked out even a tooth, he went free. Another opinion, if you slapped a slave and you raised a welt, he went free. Your slave had to eat the food that you ate. Your slave had to sleep where your children slept, in the same type of bed. And you weren't allowed to give them disgusting jobs to do. You couldn't tell them to clean out the septic tank unless you and your children have cleaned out the septic tank. So the idea is that we were allowed to have slaves, but we had to treat them. Now what happens is in every 7th year, all slaves went free. So that means if you acquired a slave, the day before Rosh Hashanah, guess what happened on Rosh Hashanah? He went free. Now, it says in the Torah, what happens if the slave says, I love my master, I love my life, I don't want to go free? So the owner takes the slave to the rabbis, to the court, and he repeats it in public. And then the rabbis take him over to the doorpost, and with an awl, which is like a screwdriver, they make a big hole in his ear over here, where people put an earring. They make a big hole, and he would walk around, and it would be a message: the ear that heard the commandment, you shall have no other master but me, that ear now is faulty. And then he was allowed to be a slave. So the question is, why would one person want to be a slave? Just listen. You don't have to pay electric bills. You don't have to pay a mortgage. You don't have to worry. Some people like that. So that would explain the situation about slavery and who stayed behind. Okay, let's read the next things that were donated to the Holy Temple.
Blue, purple, and crimson yarns, fine linen, goat's hair. What do these five have in common?
So the first were 3, now it's 5. So what's interesting here is that the rabbis, do you know where blue came from?
Yeah, from a sea, yeah, the techeles.
Right,
Exactly.
Snails.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good, everyone. It
From
was
the
called the
worm.
chilazon.
Yeah.
It was called a chilazon. It was a snail. Some people say it was a cuttlefish, which is like a squid-like. Now, what we do know is that when you would crush the sea urchin or cuttlefish, and exposure to air, when it would oxidize, and the ooze, the secretion would turn blue when it oxidized with air. Now we have this today. There are people who have proven, and that's why sometimes you'll see, for example, Rabbi Josh on Shabbat now wears a talit with blue threads, one blue thread. It's called techelet. Purple is also a royal color, and it also comes from a various natural. And crimson, here's a shocker for you. In Hebrew, it's called tola'at shani. Ahuva, break the news to them what a tola'at is.
It's a worm.
It's a worm. Absolutely. And guess what? In the Middle East, there is a snail, a land or a worm. It's also a worm, and it's bright red. It's like a crustacean, but it's more like a worm. And what happens is you crush it up, and it's bright red. And here's a little shock for you. Here in America, red dye 11 through 15 are all made from this crustacean. Here in America, red dye 11 through 15 are all made from a crustacean. And there's some rabbis who are adamant that you can't use it, it's not kosher, which makes sense because it's a worm. But next comes fine linen. Where does linen come from? Flax, which is a plant.
Ground.
Right, exactly. And the last one is goat's hair. So what do these 5 have in common? What am I doing? Look at me.
They come from live things.
Ah, very good. They come from nature. They come from things that are alive.
But they're on
Excellent.
the ground. They're not under the ground, but they are on the, like,
Right. So the first
Slowly
3 were
down, slowly.
underground. Right. The first 3 were or in the ground. These are above the ground. Right. You don't have to dig down. They're either at the seashore or they grow above the ground or they're on top of a goat. But it's interesting. What are we doing? There are different levels of lifting things up into the world. Now, let's continue.
Tanned ram skins, dolphin skins, and acacia wood. What do these 3 have in common?
So, I put in blue dolphin skins. In reality, we have no idea what they are. A lot of people say that they were seal skins. You'll see that a number of good translations will say they're seal skins. Why dolphin skins versus seal skin? Well, it was some kind of large sea creature. Now, where would we get these sea creatures? Well, here's a little shock for you. Have you ever been in San Diego Bay? Do you know what there are there? Seals. Have you ever been in Los Angeles Bay? Guess what there are there? Seals. Have you ever been in San Francisco Bay? Seals and walruses. That's pretty far up, or depending on how you want to talk, far down from what you would think is their classic habitat. So it turns out that there were some seals in the Red Sea 2,000 years ago. Rabbi, I think you're pushing it. No. There are a number of articles about animals that were indigenous to Israel that no longer
33133.
exist. So, for example, did you know that there used to be lions in Israel? Oh, come on, Rabbi, what are you talking about? They're lions in Africa. Nope. Why do you think it's called the Lion of Judea? Now, they were not as large as African lions, but they were either called, there were three different names to them: Assyrian lions, Palestinian lions, or Judean lions. They were all three different names for the same subgenus. I forget the correct term. They only weighed about 220 pounds. They were like a very large, but in Africa, they could be, substantially larger. And those were the males. The females were substantially smaller, like 100 pounds, 120 pounds, like a large dog. But there used to be lions in Israel. Do you know that they found tusks from elephants in northern Israel? Now, they may not have been indigenous, but they were brought there. What do you mean they were? Well, from where? And the answer is on various Egyptian battles with the Ugaritic tribes that they brought the Egyptians from Africa. They brought up, so there were a lot of different options for the definition as Ma'adamim and Va'orot Hashim Batzei Shitim. But what do they all have in common? It's the outside. It's ram skins. It's the dolphin skins. And acacia wood, one of the interesting things that you can do with acacia wood is that you can remove the bark in sheets and it becomes like a laminate. So everyone thinks, oh, when there's one of my favorite scenes. In fact, I'm gonna stop. One of my favorite scenes in any movie. Do you guys remember a movie called Splash? It was in the 70s. So let me remind you what it was. She is, what's her name? Hannah. I forgot her name. Hannah something. She is a mermaid.
Yes.
And she falls in love with this, what's his name? Daryl. And he is, the famous Tom, what's his name? In Private Ryan, what's his name? Tom Hanks. So she falls in love with him as a little child, and she comes out of the water as an adult, and they fall in love again. So the whole point is he buys her a gift, and he buys her a beautiful piece of jewelry, and it's wrapped up really nice. And he hands it to her, and she goes, "Oh my gosh!" She lives under the sea. She goes, "I've never seen anything so beautiful in all my life. I'm going to cherish it forever." And he goes, "You have to open it. There's something inside." She goes, "Oh, there's something better than what's outside?" This beautiful package all wrapped up. So the idea is that, think about it. We are so worried about what's on the inside, what's inside, but that we sometimes forget that the outside, the part that people throw away. There's also a movie, everyone here probably knows that I love science fiction. I love science fiction. And one of my favorites is a movie called The Book of Eli. Anyone ever see it? It's a post-apocalypse. You don't exactly know why the world is, 90% of the world has been destroyed, but he's traveling with a Bible, and he's traveling from the east all the way to the west across the United States, and he wants to deliver this Bible to, turns out it's Alcatraz, where they have a printing press and they're reestablishing world order and ethics and morality. But the whole point is there's a young girl who was born after the apocalypse, and she says to Eli, he goes, "What was it like in the before time?" And he said, "We used to throw away, people kill each other for today." It's one of the most important lines that really affected me. So, for example, what at this level, this Torah, this particular verse, is that we're so obsessed with the inside that sometimes we, you have to remember that the outside also has holiness, and we can elevate that too. So
Also, what they have in common is the impermeability of them. Both the dolphin skins, whether they're dolphin or seals, if there's one particular feature about them, is how impermeable they are. And acacia wood is known for being completely, impermeable. You
sealed,
can have
yeah.
it for outdoor furniture because it will not absorb the water. And all of these, including the ram skins, were used later on for the coverings.
So that's absolutely consistent with one of the messages that we already started today, is that the first three things came out of the earth. The second one were things that grow naturally at this plane. And now the third thing is that, we take them out of the water or whatever, and their permeability or non-permeability. So that's an excellent point, Cynthia. Excellent. All right, so why don't we continue with
Rabbi, I wanted to mention, I think you asked me about the worm. So this is, you should know, this is a female worm only. It's only the female that is red like this. And this is why it says tola'at, otherwise it's tola.
Ah, I didn't even know that. Thank you, Ahuva.
And also on this point, it cannot escape you, even as I'm reading it. The Seder that is so precise of the first three things, then the 5 things, there's a Seder to it. It's not just a random list, just exactly how there was a Seder when Hashem created the world.
Right.
And how this ties in. There's a beautiful chiddush from Rav Sachs, who says that our building of the Mishkan was really a tikkun for what Adam and Eve, destroyed, or what Adam and Eve brought to us, and how our making of the Mishkan is really paralleling
Wow.
care and the attention that was put in the creation of the universe.
Very good. Very good.
Rabbi,
Yes, Sarita.
Rabbi, in the Shema, it says that the talits, there has to be a thread of the tehelis. So if we found them again, or if they've been found again, how come that not all the talits nowadays have a thread of blue? Is that like an exclusivity, or is because the one that has been found has not been proven to be
expensive?
So, I joke sometimes there's a troublemaker in every crowd. So actually, it's an excellent question. So the point is that there are 4 different ultra-Orthodox groups that make the Techelet, and each 4 of them make it out of differently. Vishnitzer, for example, the Vishnitzer Rebbe said that you use this particular chilazon. This is the chilazon. And honestly, I can't remember which one is which, but one of them says it is a cuttlefish. And a cuttlefish looks like a octopus. It doesn't, it's like a gelatinous, like that's a cuttlefish. Well, another one says it is, the chilazon is actually that snail. And then another one says, no, it is a snail, but it's not this snail, it's that snail. So depending on who you buy it from and who you accept as the authority, so that's one of the reasons why right now we're allowed not to decide. And because for 2,000 years we didn't use it, yesh al ma lismach, there's enough to say until we're 100% sure, we will continue just to use white tzitzis. Now the other problem is, the other reason why is that it costs an additional $70 to use to get that blue thread on your talit. So for me, like for example, just put this down for a second. So like, I wear my tzitzit inside. I'm not sure if you can see it, right? This is my tzitzis. So I wear tzitzis. Now I must have 8 or 9 of them. I wash them. I put them in this special hamper for washing purposes. So I'd have to spend another $700 and then every talit I have, like I have 4 different talitot. I have a weekday, I have a Shabbat morning, I have a Rosh Hashanah, I have a Yom Kippur. Now you're running into bucks. But wait a minute. What happens if you have a big family of like 4 or 5 kids, 4 or 5 sons? Now we're talking thousands of dollars. So that's one of the reasons why we're allowed to take the lenient approach and say, listen, for 2,000 years we didn't have the blue thread. And we don't know which one of these great rabbinic masters is accurate and which the source of the chilazon. So let's wait until Mashiach comes. All right, so we're up to oil for lighting.
Oil for lighting, spices for the anointing oil, and for the aromatic incense.
So
Lapis
real quickly,
lazuli.
let me just real quickly. So the next level is, first it was stuff that we burrowed out of the ground. The second was stuff that was at the next level of creation. Then the third level of creation. Then on the things that are on the outside but not on the inside. So oil is on the inside. Spices are inside the nut. Like for example, nutmeg. The real spices are inside the nut. You have to crack the outside. You do throw away the outside. Like when you make olive oil, it's what's inside is important. So we're trying to remember these different levels of elevating things in life. The idea is some things, the outside is important. Everyone thinks it's just the inside. It's the inside, it's the outside it's also the inside. So these are different things that all have, what do they have in common? Why are they grouped in this particular way? Lapis lazuli.
Lapis lazuli, and other stones for setting, for the ephod, and for the breastplate piece. Why are these grouped together? Do you get the sense that this is a descending order in holiness?
So, anyone have a thought on that?
I don't think it's a descending order in Kedusha. I think, though, again, that the detail, there's a seder to all of it. And the fact that it's descending is just because that's the way it needs to be conveyed. It cannot be conveyed all at once. So there's a seder, but the seder is not necessarily in descending level of Kedusha.
So
Semi-precious stones?
Exactly. Lapis lazuli is definitely only semi-precious. It's a blue stone.
Right.
It's common, and it's common throughout the world. The best comes from South America, from Brazil and Peru, I think. They have tremendous, it's a very mystical stone. Many ancient cultures used it for mystical purposes. I chose this particular translation that definitively calls it lapis lazuli. But regardless, that's really interesting that a very, 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 very common stone all over the world is associated with spiritual usage in various cultures. So it's not only diamonds, it's not just emeralds, it's not just jade, that even something as common as lapis lazuli can be used for holy purposes. You see a theme here that I'm trying to emphasize this particular year? Hold on, let me just, this is the consulate calling me. Sorry.
Absolutely.
Consul General. Go ahead, Aruba, please.
Everything can be elevated and into a higher
Exactly.
higher
Everything.
level, everything, and that's what's important to show that it's also in people the same thing. You can take the poorest one, or you can take somebody who was a criminal. You can always bring him back and elevate them to make him better and holier. So I think it's very important.
Absolutely.
I think when we get to the half, or so when they measure the half, it's to show also the detail to that even.
Oh my gosh, that's that's the next thing we're gonna talk about.
Right.
So there's a beautiful story that became famous from Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. Rabbi Carlebach used to tell the story of Yosle Lekovit Shabbos, which means little Joseph in honor of Shabbos. Everything you did, he was a traeger. You know, anyone know what a traeger was? He was a porter. He wasn't very educated. Didn't have any skills. He couldn't get into a union. So he used to schlep things for a living. So he'd go every morning to the market and people would buy, 20 pounds of potatoes, 30 pounds of onions. And he would schlep them home for the women or whoever is purchasing.
Delivery
'cause he was a-
service.
Right. So when he would deliver it, people would say, I'm going to give you 2 potatoes and 3 onions. And he would say, that would be perfect for Lekavod Shabbos. And they'd say, but it's Monday. Why are you saying it's going to be perfect for Shabbat? Well, I'm going to use it Lekavod Shabbos. And then on Tuesday, he would schlep, I'm making 50 pounds of meat. They would give him a pound of, flanken. He goes, Lekavod Shabbos. Everything he got during the course of the week was always Lekavod Shabbos. And what the message is really clear. Shabbat is the holiest day of the week. And every day, starting even on Sunday, he was preparing a potato to become holy, an onion to become holy. Why? He would make a potato kugel. He would, use the onions in salads. And everything was in honor of Shabbat. And that's how he was able on a daily basis to keep the holiness of Shabbat at his intellectual forefront. And that everything he looked at in this world was to be elevated for Shabbat. And that's a beautiful way to live your life. So, for example, you go to work, I'm going to make money today so that I can give charity. I'm going to give money today so that I can have a beautiful Shabbat. I'm going to go to work today to make money. Think of a holy purpose to elevate your income. Okay, and now that leads us to the next verse.
And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. What is the famous grammar issue here? The sacham is plural. This is
very good.
And we're talking about one sanctuary. So obviously it doesn't mean the sanctuary, it means the people who are going to be in the sanctuary for sure.
When you act holy and you build this holy sanctuary, God's not going to live in the sanctuary. God's going to live in you. What happens when you elevate gold and silver and copper and skins and flax and rocks, everyday rock? What happens when you build something holy for holy purposes? How do you feel? Holy, because God is now dwelling in you. When you elevate these things for a holy purpose, it also elevates you. And you feel holy? Well, you're feeling holy because God is in you.
That's also the same concept in tzedakah, that the tzedakah we give, even though it's only 10%, it's elevating your whole income. It's elevating your whole, everything that you're gaining, that you're earning.
And that's how we started the Parashah. Terumah means laharim, to lift things up. You know, for example, the heights, the Golan Heights in Hebrew is called Ramat HaGolan. Rom means, or we sing Ram V'Nisa, God is high and mighty.
Exalted.
We use that word in English, high and mighty, Ram V'Nisa. So that means Terumah means to lift things up. We have to live a life where our goal on a daily basis is to make the world a better place, to lift things up. Even if they start in the dirt, you have to lift them up. And we can. And that's what we just learned in the first 6 verses. Okay. Why don't we get to that whole half issue? Oh, we got 9 minutes left. Let's begin.
Exactly as I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, so you shall make it. They shall make me an ark of acacia wood and 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Even in the ancient world, builders preferred whole numbers. Why here are half units used?
So it's a classic question. And the reason why I'm sharing it with you today, it's not Elliot Pearlson's question. It's a very, very important rabbinic discussion. Because what happens when you have a half? When you have a half of something? Do you ever see,
Not
let me share, do you ever see there's a piece of jewelry?
Not complete, it is to be completed later.
Ah, that's good. Do you ever see a piece of jewelry?
The broken heart into 2 pieces.
It looks something like this. And what happens is people, when you get separated, it's cut in a zigzag part, right? And you wear half and the other person wears a half.
We
The
used
whole
to do
idea,
high school.
right. So the whole idea is when you have half of this piece of jewelry, it's a reminder to you that your loved one has the other half, right? So the idea is a half means there's room to grow. A half means there's something missing yet. Your work isn't complete, right? And that's why the holy ark, which embodies the great holiness of the entire sanctuary, it's imperfect. Let's not say imperfect. Let's say it's yet to be completed. There's room
Also-
to grow.
Also, the words at the beginning that say exactly as I show you. I love that because it's setting right from the beginning that Kedusha is the domain of Hashem. It's not up to us how it's going to be built or the materials we build it. Hashem is giving instructions because Kedusha is his domain. We don't rule in that domain. And I love that part.
Oh, that's fantastic. You know, I was just thinking, when I was small and when my children were small, and you go and you buy them shoes, you never buy them shoes that fit them, right? You always buy them shoes. My parents just do it to me. I did do it a little bit bigger, room to grow, right? Yeah, never bought. Why? Because first of all, I don't know about other people's children. My children, shoes would last. They never wore out their shoes. They always outgrew their shoes. So the whole idea is you buy them a little bit bigger, you can save yourself some money, you know, you can get an extra 2-3 months out of them. So the idea is that's the idea of and a half. The ark, in fact, maybe because we only have 6 minutes left. So this is the ark. And this is the ark inside the tabernacle. And I really like this picture because first of all, you can see the walls. They were literally like Lego. They were snapped together. This bar held them vertical. It's really an amazing thing. Here are the bars that were used to carry the ark. These were 2 angels. We could be reading this, but I just wanted to show 2 angels. They're cherubs, which mean babies. Angels that had the face and bodies of an angel. And God's essence, the Shekhinah, the very presence of God, was where the angel's wings almost touched. And that's where the voice of God could come forward. Inside the ark, I think I have another picture of it. So this is what the tabernacle looked like. Here was the menorah. Here was the table of the showbreads. This is the altar. There was another of the incense. This was where the parochet, the curtain was, and behind the curtain was the ark. And what was in the ark? Let's see. I still have it.
Perdón.
And here you can actually see the workmen, you know, making the cherubs. Now here is the ark and what's inside it. So you have the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets, a jar of manna, the stick of Aaron, and according to tradition, also the broken tablets were placed into this ark.
What's beautiful about them also is that there's only one part in the whole Torah where the cherubs make an appearance, and that's at the very beginning of the story. They're the ones who end up guarding the tree of life. And what is the Torah called? The tree of life.
Beautiful.
I just love that it really is like bringing back, you know, again, I really feel that the insight of Rav Sachs, that this is a tikkun, what happened with Adam and Eve, is a good one.
So real quickly, because we only have a few moments left, this is what the tabernacle looked like, or the tent of meeting. First, there was the exterior fencing that was made out of material. Here is the outdoor altar where they used to, for lack of a better term, barbecue the sacrifices. This is where you can see the Kohanim would wash their hands. Much later on, in Talmudic times, we know for a fact that in the Second Temple, there was a cover to it to limit evaporation. Inside, this is the tent of the meeting. There are different layers of these tent skins. Remember, seal skins, goat skins, etc. You can see, I'm showing it to you. Here's the menorah. Here's the table of the showbreads. There were 12 breads representing 12 challahs, representing the 12 tribes. This is where they burnt spices, incense, and then again inside you can see the ark. Now, this is what the classic explanation of what the breads look like, the table of the showbreads. And again, these were the staves that they could carry them. Now, this is like, if you just read the text, this would appear what the table looked like. However, in the Talmud, Yoma, Menachot, you see in Bava Batra, that they said that the actual breaking of the breads were, the bread had particular shape to them. They were turned up on the ends. And this is a yeshiva in Jerusalem called Ateret Kohanim, where you can only be a Kohen and get into this yeshiva. And guess what they study? It's a 6-year program. They study all the laws and rituals of being a Kohen, so that when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, that day they can start all of these rituals all over again. And here you can see, and this is within the yeshiva, it's called Temple Institute. And here you can see where they've reproduced, according to the Talmud, what the table of the showbread looked like and what the breads themselves look like. They were turned up at the ends. And then here, this is when they gave the lecture at the yeshiva. These are the options. God forbid all the rabbis in the Talmud should all agree, but some say that it was a two-sided box, so to speak. Others said that they turned in. On the bottom, you can see the lechem panim might have looked like a taco. And the third one was the bottom might have looked like a taco, but the sides were straight up. So the idea is that even in the rabbinic lore, we're not exactly sure. Now, these, what are they carrying? These are breads. Breads, loaves of bread. There were 12 of them. So if you look closely, they actually, they did their best. You can see up here that these are loaves that of the same size based on the same amount and measurements.
Wow.
And that's why this is a pretty good rendering of what the breads look like. So I just wanted to share that with everyone so that you can get an idea of, when we read the Torah on Shabbat, so you get an idea of the holy furniture that was in the tabernacle. So any questions for me?
No, but those images were amazing. They're amazing.
Yeah. So it's called the Machon Hamikdash, and it's the institute, the Temple Institute, and they study these things all day long. Sarita, you also had a question?
Yes, Rabbi, what happened with those 12 loaves of bread every week? It was food given to the Levites or to the Kohanim, or what?
Oh, so there's something called a mishmar, which means when you're on duty, you are, what do you call it? Gosh, I'm sorry, guys. Sometimes this happens to me. Like from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, you have and you're working in a hospital.
Shift.
A shift, right. Very good, thank you. Sarita, whose English is her third language, by the way. Thank you, Sarita. So what happens is in the Holy Temple, there were shifts. And they lasted a week. And they were broken down to 56 families, Kohan families. And each one was designated a week-long shift. At the end of the week, the old chalot would be removed and the new chalot would be placed. The shift of Kohanim that were leaving received those chalot as not payment, I don't want to say payment, but the relief process where they would get to take them home and use them for their family, for their usages. And they shared them. They were allowed to be cut up and divvied up amongst the Kohen families, that family that had worked the previous week. It's sort of like, in a restaurant at the end of the day, all the leftover food, they're just going to throw it away. The waiters can take it home. The chefs can take it home. You don't want to throw it away. So basically that's not a good example, because these were holy breads. And by the way, only the Kohanim could eat it. Now, if a Kohen wanted to share it with a Kohen that had not worked that week, that was okay. But a Kohen couldn't give it to a Levite. A Kohen couldn't give it to a plain Israelite, because it was technically holy food. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed class today.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So tomorrow night,
Rabbi,
Ahuva has her class. Same place,
Thursday,
but 7 p.m. Thursday, that's tomorrow night. And next Tuesday night, Ahuva, Liliana, and Dr. Seicher are going to be giving a class to help us understand the conflict in Israel with the Supreme Court. It's not a religious topic, other than it is religious because Jews shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves in public. In private, slap me in private, but in public, no. We all have to.
Actually might have some religious happenings, results.
I'm looking forward to it then.
And there's a daily email that lists these classes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And if you don't get one tomorrow, let me know, and I'll find out why. I remember I gave your name, so
Yeah.
let's find out why you're not on the email list, in case you're not.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay,
Thank you.
very much.
All right. Have a great
Bye-bye.
day, everyone, and a good Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh. Take care, everyone.
Happy
Happy Chodesh.
Chodesh.
Bye-bye.